let's say rioters are rampaging through an area. Someone, this has actually happened, right? So Kyle Rittenhouse comes out and says, I'm going to defend this area. I'm going to stop the riots. What people need to understand about the riots in Kenosha is that it was several nights of ongoing rioting. Right. You had, I think it was a 78-year-old man I think he was 78. His building was on fire. He was trying to stop the people ransacking his store. And when he went up to stop them, someone bashed him over the back of the head with a rock. Then you get a group of people who come out. Then you get Kyle Rittenhouse. And then the media demonizes him. They continue this pressure campaign. What's the next step after we've already seen this and it's only getting worse? At a certain point, there's going to be more groups like the guys with Kyle Rittenhouse emerging. There's going to be more people doing this across the country. You're going to get more prosecutors. Right. I tweeted, I think Kyle Rittenhouse will get life. I'm exaggerating because I don't know if life is even an option based on what happened. But I think they're going to. It's going to be like Chauvin.
It would be life.
It would be life.
Yeah,
okay, well, there you go.
Charged for 2 counts of murder, so it would be life in prison without possibility of early release. I've looked at every minute of that, all the video available on Rittenhouse. I've written about it extensively. Can I mention my website? I can't remember if I did that. If folks want to see what I write about these cases, it's lawofselfdefense.com. That's all you need to know, lawofselfdefense.com. And I've looked at every bit of available video. I've done in-depth analysis based on Wisconsin law of that case, just like I would do if I was retained to consult on the case. That was lawful self-defense every day of the week and twice on Sunday. There's no question about it. The difficulty, the reason he's finding himself charged in this predicament, and this happens a lot in these cases, is that with the best of intentions, he put himself in an environment likely to turn violent. He appears as if he went to the fight as opposed to the fight coming to you. The same issue with the McCloskeys. They went out of their house to confront the protesters. If they'd stayed in their house and a protester tried to come into their house, they would have been good to go, 100%. But when it appears or could be made to appear that you went to the fight rather than the fight coming to you, it begins not to look like self-defense, even if technically, on what the law allows, it's entirely legitimate use of force.
I don't know if you can answer this, but I'll ask anyway. And if you can't, just feel free to say so. But do you think Rittenhouse is going to get life?
Again, it's one of these situations, much like the Chauvin trial, where you have to ask yourself, is this case actually being decided on the legal merits? On the legal merits, it looks to me like self-defense, 100%, all 3 events he was involved in. But if it's not being judged on the legal merits, then it's just a political witch trial, essentially. And then the outcome is all depending on, the political dynamics, the propagandizing around it. And, of course, people are not getting both sides of the story again.
Let me ask you a bit about this case. I don't know if you're able to opine more on the Rittenhouse stuff, but, so 2 people died. A third person had his I believe his right bicep was blown off. You just said that it was self-defense every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Right.
If he used more force against that last person, would that have been justified?
Against the person shot in the arm?
Yeah. So,
you're privileged to use force as long as necessary to neutralize the deadly force threat against you. Once that deadly force threat is neutralized, you're not privileged to use force anymore. So to the extent the person could no longer constitute a deadly force threat, then Rittenhouse would not be privileged to use force anymore. By the way,
would he know that, right? So the issue is this guy had a gun.
And it all is a factor of his reasonable perceptions. So it's quite possible, by the way, in the Rittenhouse case, there's cases we call awful but lawful, where both parties could believe they're justified in what they're doing. Right. So the 2 guys who were chasing Rittenhouse down the street, they may have legitimately believed that they were chasing someone who just committed a murder of the first guy in the parking lot, right? They could have believed that. That doesn't make Rittenhouse's use of defensive force unlawful because his conduct is judged by his reasonable perceptions. If he believes he just defended himself against guy number 1 and now he's being further attacked by guys 2 and 3, well, he's privileged to defend himself against the reasonably apparent threat those people present.
So I guess the way I was looking at it is, we had a conversation before the show. This third guy, I forget his name. He's got a gun. I believe he had a 9mm. Do you know what kind of weapon it was? I'm not sure.
A handgun of some kind.
Right.
I'm not sure the type.
And he tried to grab the gun from Rittenhouse, who then fired once.
Right.
Rittenhouse then backs off. Am I wrong in saying that in that moment, if it were you could have fired at the guy again?
if he still had the gun and appeared in a position to use it, then he's still a deadly force threat. I mean, if the person's attacking you with a gun and they still have the gun.
And there were still gunshots going off, apparently. I could be wrong. It's been a while since we covered this. Right. But even after he shot the guy, then he gets up and he looks around and then just turns around and calmly starts walking back. I was surprised at his demeanor. It felt like...
Rittenhouse's demeanor.
Yeah,
of course, it's hard to know what's going on in his mind. But of course, he saw the police right at the end of the street.
Right.
So he was running to safety. It appeared that he'd neutralized his attacker, so now he was able to proceed to safety. I mean, he didn't run and hide.
Right.
He ran and presented himself to the cops, which is not the conduct of someone who's just committed murder.
I guess what I'm saying is that it feels like a lot of people have said that he was in control. He was, very much he knew where to, he de-escalated essentially, right? I guess what I'm trying to say is if somebody was standing in front of me with a 9mm in their hand, I'm not just going to calmly back away as they're standing there still holding the gun, and he did.
Yeah, again, it's difficult to know what's in his mind. I mean, as human beings, we tend to engage in a lot of mind reading from a person's demeanor. We ask ourselves, hey, if I was in that situation, would I act the same way? Or if I were acting that way, what would that tell me about my own internal thought processes? But it's very dangerous to do that, especially in the context of violent confrontations. Most of us are not in violent confrontations. Most of us haven't been in a fight since junior high school or wherever. It really affects the way your mind captures and stores and processes information and makes decisions under stress, especially life-threatening stress, is completely different than the normal experience. So even Rittenhouse, if you'd asked him ahead of time, if you'd shown him that video of someone else involved in that, would have said, oh, I never would have acted that way. But you don't know until you're actually in a situation.
Well, that's one of the jokes we've seen in the Ma'Khia Bryant case. It's Ma'Khia Bryant. I'm getting her name right?
I believe that's correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So seeing people saying why didn't he shoot the knife out of her hand? As have you seen that? People actually tweeted this as if in a split second when someone draws the knife and you have a 1/10 of a second to make the decision, you could aim for the hand and lead the target as the knife is moving forward to hit just the knife and not the person behind the knife.
Right.
This is what people think.
He had 9 seconds to decide what he was going to do in that instance. He got out of his car.
Right.
This was already underway. 9 seconds between figuring out.
There's a reason every law enforcement officer in the country, everyone who takes a self-defense course for using a gun, is taught to shoot center mass on the threat, because you need those rounds to hit the actual threat, not hit innocent people downrange of the actual threat. And by the way, it's unfortunately jurors won't know that, right? We might know that. We've taken a self-defense course. But most jurors don't know anything about self-defense. They might think it's perfectly reasonable to try to shoot a knife out of someone's hands. It's one of the reasons I tell people there's no way, just like in a physical fight, I don't care what your training is, your martial arts skills, how good you are with a gun or a knife or whatever, there's no way to reduce the risk of the physical fight to zero. You can get it low if you're really skilled, but it's always greater than zero. There's always a possibility you could lose that physical fight. And unfortunately, the same is true of the legal fight. There's no way to reduce the risk of the legal fight to zero. You could do everything legally correct, but then you're put in front of a jury. And if you're put in front of a jury, there's a 10% chance you're getting convicted, because that's just the noise in the system, because they might think, a prosecutor might convince them shooting the knife out of someone's hand is a reasonable thing to attempt.
Right. And it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
Especially because depending on what kind of gun you have, it's just going to... It's going to go behind the knife. It's going to keep going past
Even if
the
it
knife.
hits the knife, it's not stopped by a knife held in someone's hand. The bullet is going to continue on until, there's no such thing as a miss with a bullet. It continues going until something stops it. It hits something.
Yeah. So looking at the Rittenhouse case and everything we've seen from the escalation of the lack of justice over the past, decade or so, or at least the attempts at stripping justice away and the riots that have resulted from it, I'm worried that Rittenhouse is going to get life. They're going to give him everything possible. The jurors will not stand up for him, especially after the photos of him, I think, with some Proud Boys. They're going to be like, deliberations, 10 minutes. Can we go home now and order pizza? Lock him up and throw away the key.
Right. So you might be able to tell yourself, well, they're not supposed to take into consideration that picture of him with the Proud Boys. I'm sure that won't be admissible in court as actual evidence. But of course, the jury's not going to be sequestered any more than they were sequestered in the Chauvin case. We don't live in the 1970s where the news is on at 6 and 10, and as long as you don't turn on your TV then, you're not exposed to the news. We're immersed in the news constantly. Those images of him with the Proud Boy will be displayed prominently every day of the trial. The jury is unavoidably going to see it, as long as seeing Maxine Waters, an equivalent, coming to town saying, hey, it better be guilty or this violence is going to escalate.
And they'll be rioting the whole time.
Of course.
You really need a jury that has no internet access. Almost like,
right.
I know, you need
it's impossible.
that, though. I know. Well, it is. Seems like it. I mean,
change of venues?
You would have to put them in a place.
So in the Chauvin trial, the defense made motions for change of venue almost every other day, it seemed like. Motions for a continuance, delaying the trial to a later date almost every other day. Every time they did it, the judge rejected it. And the judge's rationale was essentially, listen, this occurred in Minnesota. We have to have the trial somewhere in Minnesota. You can't have the trial in some other jurisdiction. Is there anywhere in Minnesota where the mob's not going to show up, where we're not going to have National Guardsmen, we won't need barbed wire and barriers? The answer, he thought, was no. So even if we change it to another venue, another jurisdiction within the state, we're still going to have the same, Maxine Waters is not going to decline to go because it's in a different city in Minnesota.
I hear that, and I think the judge's public statement was that. But if I were to make a guess, and I know mind reading, we can't do that, I'm imagining him, if I were going to make a guess about what he actually thought is, if I do this, they're going to come and burn my house down. I'll just let's lock this guy up and get it over with.
Right, because the only solution, if that's what you believe, if you believe, hey, we hold it here, it's unfair, it's not a fair trial. If we move it elsewhere in Minnesota, still not a fair trial. To me, the answer to that dilemma is not, well, we'll just give him an unfair trial here.
Right.
To me, the answer to that solution is, if we're incapable as a society of providing a fair trial,
let him go.
You can't try the guy.
Yep.
I mean, you
Absolutely.
dismiss the charges with prejudice, and you simply can't subject anybody to an unfair judicial process.
Could you imagine if Blackstone's formulation was still upheld to this day? They would have said, if the judge came out and said it's impossible to have a fair trial, and then just out of my courtroom and told all the rioters it's your fault.
Right. They would have burned the city down. And of course, the judge knows this, which is
spineless.
Basically, they sacrificed this guy. And again, listen, he might be guilty of criminal misconduct. I don't know, but I do know for sure that this process did not show that.
Well,
because the process was corrupt.
Back to Rittenhouse. What do you know when the trial is supposed to be?
I believe it's currently scheduled for November, but the nature of these things is that things get rescheduled a lot. I'm sure, of course, Rittenhouse could push for a more accelerated trial if he wants to. We all have a U.S. constitutional right to a speedy trial, but generally the defendant doesn't. They want to delay as long as possible to get as far as possible in terms of time from the event and the heat and the emotion. I mean, there's a case in Florida where a retired cop shot somebody in a movie theater, killed them over who knows what, throwing popcorn at each other or something along those lines. I think that's been 7 years now since that happened, and that retired cop still has not gone to trial, and he's 70-something years old. So I think the strategy is, if we delay long enough, God will take him before he'll be subject to a prosecution.
I'm worried that with Rittenhouse, we're going to get another. I mean, it's great for the leftists, for the cult. They're going to claim another victory in destroying the rule of law, proving that might makes right. They have the power, and that there's no justice in this country anymore. But I'm scared about what that's what that will mean to conservatives and actually anyone in this country who pays attention. I get it. Most of these liberals who vote for the Democrats don't watch the news. They don't care. They don't know. Whatever. CNN said it. It's fine. I guess whatever. But there's a lot of people like me who are slightly left leaning and do follow the news, and it's, the group of the politically homeless or the disaffected liberals. You combine those people with moderates and conservatives, and we are watching the destruction of the justice system and the fact that the judges, the mayors, the prosecutors, all of these people are so pathetic and spineless that they would rather sell out justice for their own skin instead of standing up for what they believe in and leading the charge on principle. They don't. It's gone.
It could be like an evolution of our justice system if we fix it, because I think in a modern age, those people are going to get doxxed, and they probably would have had their houses burned down, and the judge might have had his wife get. Remember that one judge? Someone went to his house went to her house and murdered
she murdered her husband and son. I think
her husband and son. So I wonder if we can start to have judicial processes where it's anonymous, where you have anonymous jurors like porting into an avatar with
absolutely
encryption and an anonymous judge, but you could somehow verify that they are real people, American citizens?
I just don't see how it could work. You'd end up with some kind of star chamber proceeding that was like a hidden justice situation, like from Central America or something.
And I think we have a right to first of all, confront the accusers, to know who our judges are, to know who the jurors are, to be actively involved and not have this information withheld from you.
And it doesn't solve the problem. You still have, the judge is going to be known. The expert witnesses are going to be known. All those people are still going to be subject to pressure. And unfortunately, America is exceptional in so many ways. And one of those ways is our criminal due process protections that we have, like a right to confront your attorney, your accuser, a right to an attorney, a right to a speedy trial.
This bill is too big.
I've had that happen. But these protections exist for a reason. It's because they help ensure something as close to justice as human beings can create. And when you degrade that, when you say, well, maybe that guy didn't get a fair trial, but come on, he had it coming, right? I mean, Chauvin had it coming. He murdered George Floyd, or whoever you think might have it coming. When you degrade that person's criminal process protections, you do it for everybody.
Right.
Because none of us can expect any more criminal due process than that guy got. Not you, not your kids, not your wife, not your brother, not your parents. Nobody can expect any more than we give the worst of us, which is why we've always given the worst of us those protections.
There are pro bono attorneys who go down to Guantanamo Bay to represent terrorists. We put Nazis on trial after World War II, and now we have a large faction of people in this country who want to destroy that. And did you hear what many of these people were saying in the Chauvin trial? You had prominent outlets saying, The Nation said, something to the effect of, in a reasonable world, there wouldn't have even been a trial. He should have just taken the plea and it'd be over. You have prominent activists on Twitter saying, why are we even holding a trial? We all watched it on video. They don't care for the rule of law.
No. And that's unfortunate, because that's not really a world that I think any of us would want to live in.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.